Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. We're going to talk all about the best cycle signs to track when trying to get pregnant and really just learn what your cycle is telling you about your fertility. I didn't learn what a healthy cycle looked like until I was in college. We should have been taught this when we were like 10, before our periods even started, but most of us don't learn much about our cycles until we're trying to get pregnant, unfortunately. Having a healthy cycle is key to optimizing fertility, though, and learning how to track it can really give you insight as to how to better support your body. An irregular cycle should be seen as a sign of an underlying health problem because fertility is impacted by overall health. And using these cycle signs gives us clues as to where to investigate further. So let's start by talking about the phases of the cycle. So the full cycle is from your period. Cycle day 1 is the first day that your period starts. That is the first phase of your cycle. So menstruation is the technical term for that. Once you stop bleeding, you're technically entering the follicular phase, which is where estrogen starts climbing, your FSH, which is your follicle stimulating hormone, starts maturing follicles to get closer to ovulation. And your LH eventually surges, which if you've taken OPKs or ovulation predictor kits, that's what you're testing. OPKs are looking at estrogen and LH together. So as estrogen gets high enough, it signals LH, which is luteinizing hormone. And luteinizing hormone is coming from the brain, the pituitary gland specifically, letting the ovaries know that it's time to ovulate because that FSH has been working hard to mature a follicle. So we have your period, we have that follicular phase where hormones are rising like crazy, and then we have ovulation or the ovulatory phase. Ovulatory phase is very short because ovulation just happens in like one day, less than 1 day, but that egg is going to be viable for like a day and a half-ish. And then after ovulation, we enter what is called the luteal phase. And in the luteal phase, progesterone is queen. So in our follicular phase, before ovulation, estrogen is queen. Once ovulation happens, progesterone starts to be secreted. So that's an important thing to know, is that we don't make progesterone unless we ovulate. So it can be a good sign as to whether ovulation is successful or not. And so that luteal phase is where progesterone is getting higher. There is still estrogen around. It even increases mid-luteal phase a little bit, but progesterone should be the primary hormone, getting that lining ready and that uterine environment ready for implantation to happen if an egg was fertilized. And then it starts all over again as progesterone decreases. We eventually bleed, leading to that first phase of the next cycle again. So I've had many clients that are confused as to why they are having trouble with trying to conceive when their period comes like clockwork. But there are many factors to consider within the cycle. So even if your period is timely, we want to be thinking about egg and sperm quality. We want to be thinking about the health of the reproductive environment as a whole, which includes immune function and gut health. But a great place to start is by looking at your cycle parameters. So even if that cycle is coming timely, there are other things we can consider to give us clues as to where to look further. And it really does go way beyond marking when you get your period. Okay. So please keep in mind that apps predict when you might ovulate and when you might get your period, but those predictions are only as good as the data being entered. Our body signs are always more accurate than what an app is going to be. So we'll talk about what signs to consider, and you can even enter additional signs into that app to make it more accurate. But if you're only entering your period timing, that ovulation timing and period timing are not going to be as accurate. So hopefully that makes sense. Cycle length is just the one parameter to determine whether your cycle is healthy or not. But it is also an important one. So we'll start with the cycle length. An average length of your cycle or of the cycle is 28 days. That's kind of a textbook cycle, but you can have a healthy cycle outside of the 28-day cycle range. It's totally normal to have fluctuations in your cycle length of a couple of days here and there, but if it's consistently outside a 24 to 35 day cycle, or it fluctuates more than 8 days from cycle to cycle, so maybe it's still falling within that 24 to 35 day range, but it's like by 8 days each cycle, your body is giving you a clue, and that is having trouble balancing hormones and ovulating regularly. So we need to dive deeper if that's happening, and we also need to consider these other parameters. So start tracking these parameters if you aren't right now. Your fertile window. So this starts in the follicular phase and goes into the ovulatory phase. Women are only fertile for about 6 days in any given cycle. So you don't have to be worried about tracking outside of that fertile window or thinking about trying outside of that fertile window. But this time frame, this 6 days of being fertile, is really going to depend on good quality cervical mucus. So your fertile window is defined by when you're going to be seeing fertile cervical mucus. Fertile CM should be present anywhere from 2 to 7 days each cycle. And good quality cervical mucus is really important because it preps the sperm for fertilization. It keeps that sperm alive for up to 5 days, and it helps it swim to meet the egg at ovulation. If you aren't seeing any fertile cervical mucus, it's really time to investigate. Listen to episode 15 on the Fertility Dietitian podcast to learn much more about good quality cervical mucus and how to improve that. The next parameter that we want to pay attention to is ovulation. Okay. We aren't having a real period without ovulation. So if it feels like that period is coming very consistently, but it's really, really light and scant, you need to think more about whether you're ovulating and the quality of that ovulation. If you aren't ovulating, it will typically extend your cycle length and result in that really light bleed, which is called an anovulatory bleed, or it will shut down your period completely. Consistently ovulating between cycle day 10 and 23 is a sign of healthy cycle. So thinking about what cycle day you're seeing those fertile cervical mucus signs will help you determine when you're ovulating. You can, of course, add in additional testing tools to see when that ovulation is happening. But always remember that OPKs, or ovulation predictor kits, are only going to predict ovulation. They're not confirming that it actually happens for sure. The only way that you can confirm ovulation really happened is with basal body temperature. Your cervical mucus is going to give you insight into when ovulation is happening, because the most cervical mucus is going to be present that day before or the day of ovulation. If you need help ovulating, nutrition, gut health, and hormone balance are imperative. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I love helping women navigate this and get that ovulation coming consistently. If your body has shut down ovulation, it's a huge red flag that it's not feeling safe enough to support reproduction. And not only are you not able to ovulate, the quality of those eggs that you may ovulate occasionally are probably not very good. So I recommend using cervical mucus and basal body temperature for predicting and confirming ovulation together. The next parameter that we want to pay attention to is the luteal phase. So this phase of your cycle is when progesterone is going to be kind of the queen hormone on board. If you are spotting the week before your period or seeing your period less than 10 days after ovulation, there's something up with your hormone balance and the quality of progesterone that you're producing, or potentially the quality of progesterone that you're producing. Sometimes it's more of an estrogen issue overall. The Dutch test is one way that, or one tool that we can use to help us weed out what's going on and create a plan that's targeted for your body. But I always want you to remember that hormones are never a root cause. They're really good at letting us know when we might need to dig deeper, but doing a Dutch panel and seeing that your hormones are off and where they are off is not going to be the last test or the last investigative tool that we would use if we were to work together, because they are never the reason that you're not ovulating. There are underlying things behind those hormones that is driving your luteal phase off, or any part of your cycle off. Another parameter that you want to pay attention to is just the symptoms. So the pain and bleeding outside of your period. Pain anytime or bleeding outside of your period is never normal. If you have to take pain meds for your cramps or at any time in your cycle, or if you experience bleeding throughout your cycle, first get a physical exam. If you don't get any answers with that, ask for more testing, like a pelvic ultrasound for starters. And then if there's nothing structural concerning, find a provider that is willing and able to help you dig deeper, because I work with women all of the time who have experienced pain during their cycle, even like around ovulation, leading up to their period, on their period, and always either thought it was normal or never really were able to get the right support to dig deeper, and were able to drastically change their symptoms on their cycle, throughout their cycle, wherever they were happening. So please know that we can learn how to work with your body better and support what it needs. So you don't have to live month to month with these issues, and it's going to automatically support your fertility. It's going to decrease inflammation. It's going to improve lining health. It's going to support egg quality. It's going to help your body feel safer to nourish fertility and create that environment that is optimal to have that healthy baby. Okay. And last but not least, the flow of your period is an indication of lining health, as well as what's happening with hormone balance throughout your cycle. If your flow is too light or too heavy, it can interfere with implantation and interfere with how it's going to nourish an embryo if implantation is able to happen. So your flow should be anywhere from 3 to 7 days long, typically, or at least 20 milliliters of blood lost and not more than 70 milliliters. If it's outside those ranges, whether it's super heavy or super light, it's time to dig a little bit deeper. Always remember that when we listen to your body and we give it the support it needs, fertility is going to thrive, but we have to look at fertility very holistically in order to get to that point. I'd love to support you in uncovering the barriers getting in the way of having a healthy baby. And if you're ready to stop guessing, reach out. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.